is you will find purpose and you will find meaning in your daily actions and the things that you're doing day in, day out. Let me illustrate for you how this works. So I just found some information about this world we live in today that I just want to share with you, some just research this week. And here's what I found. 46% of kids right now in the U.S., actually in Oklahoma, are born out of wedlock. Okay? So half kids today born in this state are born to families where mom and dad don't have any type of formal commitment together. We also see this, 77% of black kids are born into families out of wedlock. Okay, that's crazy. 3/4 of all black kids are born to families out of wedlock. 34% of kids in our neighborhood here in East Tulsa struggle with hunger. Okay, that's 1 in 3. 1 in 3 in our neighborhood struggle with hunger. Suicide rates have increased 37% in the past 5 years. That is, there's one suicide every 11 minutes. So in the time that we sit here today in service, 6 people in our country will commit suicide. Okay? Here's the other side of that. 1.2 million will actually attempt it this year. Okay? 46,000 actually accomplish it. Another 1.2 million actually attempt it. Is that not stunning? That's crazy. There has been a 30% increase in murders in the last 2 years, which is the largest increase since the FBI started keeping records in 1960. Largest increase in the murder rate. Education test scores have plummeted since the pandemic and they shut the schools down. They're looking now at the test scores and seeing they're some of the lowest test scores we've ever recorded in our country, and there's a dramatic drop-off of the test scores of our children. Mass shootings seem to be almost like a monthly event now. Okay, mass shootings are so common at this point, we don't even address them most Sundays anymore because they just happen. They're just kind of part of life. Where they used to happen, I used to kind of switch up my message for the week and kind of go, how do we process this? Now it's just kind of become the norm. Okay? Personally, and on Wednesday nights, on Wednesday nights and in our community, here's things we see firsthand right here at our church. We see hungry kids every single Wednesday night when we come in here. There's a set of the kids that you can tell they're just dying to get our cheap hot dogs and chips because they haven't ate for a while. So they just want the food. We see fatherlessness in our kids here on Wednesday nights and in our community. To the extent of this, I think I shared this a few weeks ago, of the 26 kids we had in a children's department 2 weeks ago on Wednesday night, there were 4 that had dads at home, like their biological dads at home. So that means 22 without a dad or without their biological dad. 4 have their actual dads around. Okay? Crazy. We see kids who have family members in prison. This was a revealing one to me. On our Wednesday night program, we break them down after I teach into small groups with leaders, and I usually take one group of them. I try to get the kids that bother everybody else and put them all in my group so the other sponsors don't have to deal with them. So I had 6 of them, and we were going through that night, and one of the topics came up at prayer time because at the end of the small group questions, we ask them if they have anything to pray for. And the first kid said, hey, would you pray for my uncle who's in prison or something? He gets out in a couple years. Pray for him. And then when one kid says something, it kind of gets all their mindsets on. I had 6 boys in my group. All 6 boys, as they went around the group, all talked about how they have family members in prison and if I pray for that person in prison. Okay? Insane. Where I was just like, I was kind of taken aback, and I was like, this is crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Every one of them has a family member in prison. We see kids who are desperate to have any adult contact. Christy and those that work with the littler ones on Wednesday nights, they see that these kids just cling on you. Even in our elementary age kids, they want to touch you constantly. And it's kind of weird because it's not normal, but they just want to touch you. They physically want to touch you because they're not used to having adults around that actually touch them and interact with them. So they just want to be close to you and stand right next to you. They want to touch you. It's kind of odd, but it's these kids desperate for human interaction. And the other thing we see in our neighborhood and all is just the crime rate. We can see the crime rate. We can see the things that happen. And crime is rampant throughout this country and throughout our city and throughout our neighborhood. Crime is increasing and it's kind of rampant. Now, here's the thing. If you live life through the lens of the macro, which is you look at all this in the big picture view of things. If you look at it that way in macro view, this information will overwhelm you and it will lead you to a point of hopelessness about the future because you realize you have no power to really change it. Okay? Because honestly, we are all just people, normal people. None of us are exceptionally different. We're not Elon Musk. We're not these people who change the world with one decision. We're just people that go to work. We do our jobs. We raise our families. We live our lives. That's who we are. And if you have the macro view, you read those stats and you will get depressed. And what happens is you will feel hopeless, and that will lead to apathy, and it will lead to you isolating yourself and your family from the world around you. So what happens is you just get apathy because you go, I can't do anything, and then you start to withdraw as individuals and as families from this world we live in. Or the other thing I see a lot with Christians is this: you assume that Jesus is coming back soon, and you'll say it's the end times and Jesus is coming back real soon. And so what that allows you to do as well is check out, kind of focus on you and your own, and just wait for his return. And it's kind of like an excuse to kind of step out of everything and just go, well, Jesus is coming back. It's about the end times. It doesn't really matter. And I can just step back and I can disengage from stuff. The thing about that is that's a miserable place to live. And honestly, it's not appropriate for followers of Jesus Christ. Having that mindset and the mindset of withdrawing and the mindset of getting apathetic and just distancing yourself, that is not appropriate for followers of Jesus Christ. Now, on the other hand, if you view life through the micro, which is looking at the smaller day-to-day interactions, just a smaller view of things, a micro view of things, here's what will happen when you see that same information. It will upset you, it will disturb you, and it will sadden you. To be honest with you, most Wednesday nights when I go home from our ministry here, I don't feel great. I usually walk away and just go, I'm saddened. I see what these kids go through every day of their life. I see how they interact with us. I feel brokenhearted most nights when I first walk home for the first probably half an hour, 45 minutes after I get home from my Wednesday night. So the same information, the same things you see will do that stuff to you. But instead of leading to apathy, and instead of checking out, when you have the micro view, what it does is it gets you focused and it gets you ready to go to work. It makes you go, I have to do something. I can't just sit back and not engage in this. I have to do something. And that's exactly what we see God did. What's interesting is we see how God saw the world. If you go to Psalms chapter 14, here's how he describes what he saw. It says, the Lord looked down from heaven on the entire human race. He looks to see if anyone is truly wise, if anyone seeks God. And it says this, but no, all have turned away, all have become corrupt, no one does good, not a single one. Okay? In Romans 3:23, it says this, for everyone has sinned and all fall short of God's glorious standard. So God looked down on this world and he saw complete mess, complete anarchy, complete rebellion against him. That's what he saw, to the point that he says, no one's good. No one's seeking to do the right thing. That's the world he saw. But when you look at his actions, he did not turn his back. He doesn't check out. He doesn't just walk away from it. What you see is he doesn't have the macro view of it where he is overwhelmed by it, looking at it and just go, I'm done with this thing. Instead, what he did is he went to work in a micro way. Let me explain what I mean. Think about his life and how he lived his days here. God sees this world that has fallen, completely broken, and he decides, I have to save it. I'm going to save these people. And look how he did it when you think back through his life. What he did is this. First thing he did is he became one of us. He didn't show up in the sky. He didn't do this show for everyone to see. He is born as one of us to a common working class family that no one knew. Joseph and Mary are not known people other than to their family and their friends. They're not known in the world at all. They're not special. They're not kings. They're not queens. They don't have influence anywhere. He's a carpenter. They're just average people. That's the family he's born into. He spends his first 30 years in obscurity, meaning we don't know much about his life at all other than his birth. We know he went to Egypt, escaped death for a while, but that was his family taking him there. We see a little thing, I think, when he's 12, where he's at the temple and his parents forget him back in the town for like 2 days before they figure out he's not with the family, and they go get him. And that's all we know of his first 30 years of his life. Then when he comes out of the shadows, he does ministry for only 3 years. Okay? Understand real quick. I've been doing ministry 27 years at this point. Jesus does 3. He does 3 years of ministry. After that, during those 3 years of ministry, he doesn't travel more than about 50 miles from Jerusalem. So his spot where he goes is only about a 50-mile radius through his 3 years of ministry, which is astonishing to think about. If you're going to save humanity, that you don't travel more than 50 miles when you're preaching about who God is and what God desires. He saves within a 50-mile radius. He focuses on 12 guys, and his 12 guys he focuses on are not kings, they're not influencers, they're not wealthy people. The 12 guys he picks are most likely older teens, probably from the age of 16 to 17 years old up to young 20s, which is maybe 20 to 21, 22 at the max. Usually when we think about the disciples, we think he was like recruiting like these 30-year-old guys. They weren't. He was recruiting like old high school, early college age. That was his 12 disciples that he focused his time on. Eventually, he's killed as a criminal on a cross. That's how he goes out, is he's killed on a cross just like a common criminal. After his death, his followers, we know, go right back to fishing. So he dies, and all of his guys basically go, we're just going back to what we were doing before we ever met this guy. We don't know what to do, and they go back to fishing. The next thing we see is this. He has his resurrection. He arises. We see over a 40-day period, he talks or interacts with about 500 people according to the scriptures. Let me stop you for a quick second. If you are God who's going to save humanity and you want everyone to know that you came, you rise from the dead and you're here for over a month. Are you going to talk to more than 500 people? I would be thinking I'm trying to find some way to get as many people as I know to see me, because that's going to convince them. Here, he communicates, it says around 500 people that actually saw him after his resurrection. And at that time, when he ascends back to heaven, he's basically unknown that he ever even lived in this world. He is barely a footnote in the history books written about his lifetime. No one knows that he ever existed at that time. He's not written about. The Romans, there's a few references. There's a few scholars that reference who he is. But in general, he is, at his time of his death and his ascension, he is unknown to this world by the vast majority of people. Never heard of his name, have no clue who he is, other than a small little pocket of people. Yet, what happened? Well, with that one life, he changed the world forever and for all time. That one life, doing what he did in that micro way, he changed the entire world in the course of history of humanity. And how did he do it? He did it very simply like this. He did it through influencing a small number of people that he intentionally picked out to go, I'm going to impact those people with the truth of God. And that's how he did it. He did it with just a few people. So here's what Jesus' life tells me about changing the world. It's this. We don't have to solve all the problems of this world in order to change it. We simply need to focus on a few people whose lives we can impact and lead to the truth of God. That's all we have to do. What happens is this. When we get the macro view, we see all this darkness in our world. We see all this evil in our world. And we look at all of it and we realize this. Who are we? I'm just an individual. I have no real influence. I'm just doing my thing. I know some people, but I don't really have any major influence. And what happens is we just go, I'll just live my life. I can't really make an impact, and I'll leave it up to the big people. I'll let them do it. Okay? That's unhealthy. That's not what we're called to do as followers of Jesus Christ. I think Jesus laid the model down, which is this. He didn't come in 2020 when he could be on TV for everyone to see. He came 2,000 years ago to Rome, and he stayed in a very small little area with a few people. He influenced 12. He had a lot of others he preached to, but he wasn't some guy that everybody knew who they were. You read about Caesar, you read about all the Roman emperors, you read about all those guys in the history books, and you don't see Jesus other than tiny little snippets. He was a small fish in a very, very large pond, yet that one fish changed the entire course of history. That's what we see from him. Philippians 2:15, it simply says this: live clean, innocent lives as children of God. Shine like bright lights in a world full of crooked and perverse people. That's what we're called to do. We're called to focus on the micro, and we're called to just be people who shine by living a different lifestyle, a different way than everyone else around us. That they see something is different about the life that we live and the choices that we make. So today, here's my question I want us to kind of talk through a little bit, which is this. What are you going to do today? What are you going to do today? What can you do to focus on the micro, trusting that God can do something valuable with that micro? What are you going to do? That small thing you do, what are you going to do today? I'll give you a few ideas of what we've done recently, or what I've done recently. Just yesterday, we had our food bank here. So we go outside, and the way it works is we got all the food in here, and since COVID hit, we don't line them all in the hallway like we used to. Everyone stays outside. And at the beginning of that, I go out, I tell the people kind of how it works, and then I pray with them. And so I went outside yesterday like normal. There's probably 50 people standing out there. I'm just like, hey, if you want to pray with me, great. If you don't want to pray with me, that's fine. But I'm going to pray right now. And so I pray, and I have a prayer before we start serving them their food. When I open my eyes, I kind of look out in the crowd, and there's 3 boys, which are boys that attend Wednesday night with us. And they happened to be walking from the park over to the library and saw people were at the church. So they came and just got in the crowd because they were like, what's going on at the church? So they were out in the crowd, and I was like, hey, Bucky, what's up? And he's like, hey, we just were walking by, and we want to see what was happening. So I went over and I grabbed a thread. I said, you guys want to serve with us? And they're like, well, we're just going to the library. I'm like, you want to serve? They're like, sure, what's serving? We're like, we'll show you what serving is. So I brought them in, and I had Bucky. It's the 2 little smaller ones that are painted, Aiden and I don't know what the other. So the 3 of them. So bring them in, and at first I had them go with me for a couple carts. I'm like, guys, just follow with me. I'm going to show you how to do this. We just roll these carts out. We go to the cart, we put the food in for the people or whatever, and we tell them, God bless you and have a great day, and then we walk away. So I did that a couple of times. Then I had to go sign people in, so I assigned those 3 out. So I gave one of them to Autumn, I gave one to Chaz, and I gave one to Paul, right? Paul, you had one? So I just said, hey, you guys partner up with them and just work with those adults. And so they were like, well, what do we get? And I was like, well, you get to serve. That's what you get. You get to serve. Like, you're helping people out. And so I was explaining to them why we do the food bank and who we're helping. I'm like, you can see a lot of these people are older, so they don't have a lot of food. A lot of them, they don't have a lot of money. And I'm like, that's why we serve these people. And they're like, oh, you guys do this a lot? We're like, do it once a month. We serve them. They're like, whoa. And they're like, well, what do we get? And I was like, here's what we'll do. I'll get you candy afterwards. Does that work? They're like, oh, yeah, that works. And then Becky's like, I want candy too. And I was like, well, Becky, you're an adult. You don't get candy. So anyways, they were here. They served with us all morning, doing the carts and stuff like all that. Then they hung out till we closed the doors, hanging out with everyone, running around with some of our other kids and stuff like that. And then towards the end, I got them all bags, including Becky. Okay, so I went and got bags of candy, made them in my office real quick, and then I got them pop out of the fridge. So at 10 in the morning, they were eating big bags of candy and Coke. I'm not their parent. It's not on me. I didn't have to see them after they had them go home. So anyways, why I bring that up is this. Yesterday, those 3 adults in our church community, it's a micro thing. It's 3 boys in the neighborhood. They were walking by. We didn't do anything life-changing or life-shattering. We didn't have some big program. We didn't do this to get them in. They came. They saw the doors were open. We said, hey, let's have you serve with us. And they got to see God's people actually serving the community. That makes an impact. That's micro. It's not the macro thing. It's not some big program we spent months trying to put together to make work and all that to impact the community. It was something we saw an opportunity and went, boom, here we go, here's an opportunity. It's a micro thing, and I guarantee you that has more impact on them than if we did a program for an hour and a half where they came in here and were entertained for an hour. Okay? That thing meant more than the other one. Those are the micro things we can do. What are you going to do today? It can be maybe in your head you're thinking, you know what, there's someone I felt like I need to reach out to. Not there to present Jesus to them or anything. I'm just reaching out. Maybe I make a phone call today just to say, hey, I was thinking about you. How you doing? And have a little conversation today to let them know someone cares about them. Maybe it's when you're at the store today and you're at the cash out register and there's that person there cashing you out and you have a small little conversation with them just to let them know they're more valuable than just someone there cashing you out. Okay? What are you going to do? What's the micro thing you can do? Here's the thing. Micro things are not hard, but you have to be intentional. You have to be thinking in your head, I'm doing this because I want to impact this person on a small little level. I want to plant a tiny little seed. So you have to learn to be intentional, but you don't have to do big things. You just do things within your regular flow of life that you go, I'm being intentional in this to impact these people. Let me tell you the one things that I'm going to do today that's on a micro level. I'm going to leave here today when we're all done. This is what my routine typically is, unless we take some of the kids out to lunch with us. I'll go home. I'll probably make some great value swirls and cheese when I get home. So I'm going to cook those up real quick. I'm going to eat them. Then I'm going to sit on my couch for about 35 minutes. I'm going to doze off because I'm going to be exhausted, so I'm going to fall asleep for about 35 minutes. And then when I wake up, I'm not going to want to move, and I'm going to be like, I just want to sit here today because this kind of feels nice to have a day where I can just sit and do nothing. But instead, I'm going to go, no. I'm going to go play basketball today because it's something that it's a gift God has given me, so I can go play it. But I'm going to come up here. I'm going to play basketball with 20-some guys that don't know Jesus and don't go to church anywhere. And I'm going to come up here and play. And that's a micro thing. What's Paul Thomas going to do? Paul and James are two of the other guys, adult guys here that play with us regularly. They're probably going to do some sort of similar thing, and then we're going to come up here and we're going to play. Matthew does it with us. So Matthew, one of his routines is he always comes up here. Matthew's always with us for basketball. And he'll be here and he sits on his couch and then he comes in here. And then Paul eventually leaves and we have to kick Matthew out of church because he won't leave. And we're like, Matthew, your dad's already in the car. You got to go, buddy. You got to go. Those are micro things we're going to do. But let me tell you the impact here. We'll have 20 guys here today probably playing. 5 to 6 years ago, we started playing Tuesdays and Thursdays. Let me tell you how it started. Me and Gideon started, and from my AAU team that I had been coaching, when I sent them into the school system, I thought I'd bring 1 or 2 back and we'd just come up here and we would play, and it would give me an impact to actually be more than just a basketball coach to them. I'd have other opportunities. And for 1.5 to 2 years, it was typically me and Gideon, and eventually those guys left and it translated into Preston, who I taught to play basketball, and then there was Lisa, who was a girl that I don't even know how she got here from the neighborhood, and we taught her to play basketball. And we would come here every Tuesday, every Thursday, and I would teach them basketball. Every Tuesday, every Thursday, teach them basketball. Come up here on Sundays. Sundays started, Shane, you played a couple of times early on, right? When we first started that ministry. Even Chuck played with us a few times. Didn't you, Chuck? Back in the day, and that's back when none of us had done anything physical, so like one trip down the court, we're all sitting there like, oh my gosh, I think my heart's going to blow up. Holy crud. Micro little things that you continually do. Here's what that's turned into in 5 to 6 years, doing this, just the same micro thing all the time. 5 to 6 years, I can tell you right now, we probably have anywhere from 60 to 70 guys that come through here every Tuesday and Thursday that rotate through on a monthly basis. So almost every time I have probably 15, and on good days, now summer sitting, I'll probably have 25 each of those days. So we have 60 to 70 guys that do not step into church anywhere. I have several other gang members. I have several that I have seen on Facebook where they have their mug shots taken because they've robbed places, armed robbery, and they come play here with us. And when they come play here with us, they try to clean up their language. They stay chill. I scream at them from time to time because they get a little overboard, and they listen, and they just go, okay, sorry, Scott, and they chill out. That's what micro things do. Are we planting seeds? Absolutely. This Sunday ministry today, we'll have there's another separate group of about 30 to 35 that come through on the Sundays that just rotate through, okay? If you think about that, little micro thing, 100 people that we plant seeds with that don't walk in these doors because this is so foreign to them, they can't even comprehend this, but they come to a church building to play basketball and they're surrounded by Christian men and they get to see some quality Christian people. Micro things. That's what we're looking to do. So my question goes back to, what are you going to do today on a micro level to start to impact the world? Here's the thing. Change your view, change this world. You don't need to solve all the world's problems. You just need to impact someone's life. Through that, you can trust God can change the world then. Okay? That's what we're called to. I want to wrap up with this last scripture, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 58. I love this scripture because here's the hard part. When you operate in a micro and you have your view on the micro, most of the times you feel like you're doing nothing. Okay? You walk away and you feel like you made no impact, you totally failed, nothing's going, you're not making any impact, and that was a total worthless point of my efforts and time and stuff like that. I'm speaking to you honestly from my perspective That's how I feel a lot of times. And this is a scripture I love because it reminds me of this. It says this: "So my dear brothers and sisters, be strong and immovable," meaning don't give up. Keep doing it. Always work enthusiastically for the Lord, which means, let me tell you how this one translates. Wednesday nights for 2/3 of the year this year, as we rebuilt this thing, we had most nights, Shane, like 5 for probably 2/3 of the year, right? Probably 5 kids, 4 to 5 kids, where you're sitting there going, dude, why are we doing this? And I would think, why does Shane drive all the way in here from his house to do this with 4 or 5 kids? Like, why are we doing this? But I read this scripture and it says, no, you keep working hard, you work enthusiastically for the Lord. And it says, for you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless. By the end of the year, the last 6 to 8 weeks of our school year, I told some of you the story. These are the micro things. My neighborhood, I've got some kids destroying a fence in my neighborhood. So they're out there pounding a fence and ripping this fence apart. I have my neighbor who sits outside all the time wanting to shoot people. That's his goal. Woodrow's whole goal in life is he sits outside wanting someone to give him a reason just to shoot someone. And so he sits in his little wheelchair with his gun close by, hoping he gets the opportunity. And I came out that day, and he's like, Scott. I was like, yeah. And he's like, look at those kids. I was like, what? I'm like, oh. He's like, they're tearing down that fence. They're making a mess in the neighborhood. They threw garbage in your yard right over there. They're down in the drainage ditch, and they were throwing bottles down in there. He's like, I was like, do you want me to do something, Woodrow? He's like, yeah, you want to do something? I was like, let me go handle it, Woodrow. I'll see. So I walked down 3 houses. I said, hey, guys, what are you doing? They're like, what? I'm like, why are you guys throwing bottles over by my house? Why are you destroying the fence? Why are you making our neighborhood look like trash? Like, keep our neighborhood like, do you want to live in a trash neighborhood? They're all like, no. Then stop making it look like trash. Let's live in a nice neighborhood. Take care of the things we have, stuff like that. And then one of the kids goes, wait, I know you. Don't you come to our school? I was like, yeah, we come eat with you or whatever. I know you or whatever. Like, oh, hey, Mr. Scott. And they like shake my hand on. Then they all start like getting friendly with me. And they're talking, blah, blah. And they're like, why, you live right there? I was like, yeah, I live right there. I'm like, I'm just a minister down the road. They're like, oh, can we go to church? And I was like, well, you can. I mean, you can talk to your mom or whatever. Then the mom comes stomping out of the house, which you're thinking, oh, this is going to be great here because she's coming over because some guys yelling at her kids. She comes over and she's like, oh, you're a minister? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, my kids want to go to church, but I don't want to go. I don't want to take them. And she's like, can they go with you or something? I was like, yeah, I can pick them up on Wednesdays if you want. Like, I drive a bus through here. I'll pick them up or whatever. She's like, yeah, they've been asking me for a long time to go to church. I'm not going to go, but if you want to pick them up, you can take them. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll pick them up. Here's some information. I pull up that week. I get 2 houses, and there's 10 kids from those 2 houses. So they're 2 houses down from me, across the street from each other. They all hop on the bus. End of the year here, we had, 25 a night for the last 3 to 4 weeks? 25 a night coming to that. Why? You do the micro. Stick with it. Push through. Be enthusiastic. Work hard. Don't worry if it looks like you're making progress or not. Guess what? Jesus' followers didn't think he was making progress either because he died. And they went, let's go back fishing. And Jesus took these teenage guys, left it all in their hands, changed the world. Okay? Don't worry about the macro. Focus on the micro. We can change the world. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father,